So it's been about 2 years since the launch of the RTX 4090, and I gotta admit that I have some mixed feelings about it. Now, yes, this is the most powerful GPU on the market and there's nothing else that can beat it. It can pretty much handle anything that you throw at it: 4K gaming, 8K gaming, with ray tracing, amazing graphics all across the board. Even if you're a photo or video editor, this card can chew it up like a piece of cake. But before we continue with this video, let's do a quick run through of its specs. So it has a base clock of 2235 megahertz, a boost of 2520, a memory clock of 1313 megahertz, and a 24 gigabyte GDDR6 memory size. It has a memory bus of 384 bits and a whopping 450 watt TDP. And I've actually seen it go higher than that, like upwards of 600 sometimes, of even 700, depending on which power supply or configuration or clock that you have going on. But this is a very power-hungry card, I gotta say. And there's no doubt about it that this card is pretty much perfect or the best in all areas, but there are still some caveats with the RTX 4090. Now, if you've taken a look at the overall GPU market over the past few weeks, prices have been dropping quite significantly, with many 30 or 40 series RTX cards selling close to MSRP brand new, or even less than that when they're in the used market. But the same can't be said for the 4090. Across all the lineups, across all the manufacturers, they seem to really hold their value even up until this very day. The MSRP for the 4090 came out to around $1,600 on launch day, and as of currently, if you go to any sort of computer store like Micro Center or Best Buy, they're selling the branded ones with the various manufacturers, Asus, MSI, Gigabyte, for around the $1,800 upwards of $2,000 range brand new, which is definitely higher than the MSRP, but it's not significant. But if you look at the Founders Edition cards, these are going used for upwards of $2,500, which is quite intense. I understand that it's a more limited edition card. You know, it's like the reference card that NVIDIA designed as the base standard for the 4090. A lot of times we buy the Founders Edition cards for the sake of the novelty aspect, right? But even if you just look at the retail prices for a lot of the other manufacturers, around $2,000 for a 4090 is still a lot of money, to say the least. And as we dive deeper into this video, you'll kind of see why I keep bringing up the price and why I think that's kind of a problem. The next generation RTX 50 series cards are coming out either later this year or early next year, and they're bound to launch at any point right now. And we always see this happen. You know, the flagship card of the previous generation always holds its value until the very, very end. And finally, when the new generation cards drop, that's when something like this will absolutely plummet in value. And if you bought it at a high price, you would have taken that huge depreciation hit. And if you look at the history for all of the flagship GPUs over the past few generations, they get slammed pretty hard. For example, like the GTX 1080, the flagship of its time, the most pinnacle, the most powerful, the most expensive card, is now only worth like $200 and no one even wants it anymore. And that brings up the question, should you buy an RTX 4090 in 2024? And honestly, it's quite a hard recommendation to give. The $2,000 price range for a 4090 doesn't seem so bad unless you start comparing it to the other options that are available. The RTX 4080 Super, for example, you can find them for around $700 to around $1,000, can supply up to 80% of the performance of the 4090 at only half of the price. And if you were to overclock the 4080 Super, then that gap of performance really starts to tighten down. And that's why the price you have to pay to get a 4090 doesn't really seem to be justifiable. You can get two 4080 Supers for the price of one 4090. Not to mention the rising issues of the 4090 burning through power supply cables and catching on fire, which is a whole ordeal of its own. And just to quickly explain what's going on, the 16-pin power cable that is supplied with a lot of the RTX 4090s are just really poorly made. And so they're exploding, they're catching on fire, they're literally melting. And NVIDIA actually did speak up about this, and the way they talked about it kind of blamed the customers in a way where they said, oh, you guys are just not plugging it in correctly, it's a little bit loose, it has to be a secure fitment. But that's really not the case. It's just this card consumes way too much power and it's just blowing through cables, which is kind of a fire hazard, it's dangerous. I figured the safest method to hook up a 4090 without any issues is to just not use the adapter. I would suggest getting a ATX 3.0 certified power supply that has a dedicated RTX cable, you know, something that has a 16-pin power port, and that way you can have a single clean cable going from the GPU all the way to the power supply, and you don't have to use any dongles or splitters and stuff like that, which can minimize the risk of something catching on fire or melting. Now, I'm not saying that the 4090 is something to completely avoid. It still offers the best performance in the market. There's nothing that can beat it. Even if you were to get like a 4080 Ti or a Super and overclock it to the max, it still won't be exactly the same as what the 4090 can offer. But when it comes to the cost, it's like you really gotta pay to play kind of thing, and it's not a perfect card either, with the issues that I mentioned earlier with the melting and whatnot. And that's why I think it's a little bit difficult to consider purchasing a 4090 in 2024, especially when the new 50 series cards are just on the edge of dropping at any point now. So is it better to just buy a 4090 now or wait until the 50 generation comes out? Now, personally, I would actually suggest waiting to either go get the newer generation card or waiting until the new generation comes out so you can get the 40 series at a discount. But if you're someone who's trying to get the most bang for your buck, I still think the 4080 Super is the best for its value. For $1,000 or less, you can get something that's really close in performance to a 4090 without breaking the bank. You also get a little bit of better reliability and cooling because it doesn't consume as much power. And the 4080 Super can also handle 4K gaming and editing and all that with ray tracing. So you're not really missing out too much by not getting a 4090. But these are just some of the thoughts that I have about the RTX 4090. Let me know what you think in the comment section below if it's still something that's worth it to you in 2024. I recently just completed a build from one of my friends who also opted for a 4090 and he absolutely loves it and he has no regrets. So I really think it's to each their own and your preference and what you're really looking for out of a GPU. But hopefully this video can kind of clear the air as to some of the concerns about the 4090 in this time period, based on the price, based on the reliability aspect, and just the overall price to performance ratio being a little inflated. With that being said, if you guys want to see me build another PC with this exact 4090, make sure to click the link in the description below. We're doing a mini ITX build, and yes, a mini ITX build with a full-size 3-slot card. And it's gonna be pretty hectic, it's gonna be a little bit difficult to do, but we all love a challenge. And so if you guys wanna see this GPU come to life in a mini ITX build, make sure to hit that link in the description below. With that being said, thank you for watching, and I will see you in our next one. Peace.